welcome to another episode of From There to Here. I'm your host, Lawrence Temple. And today I have a special guest. We go way back to high school days and before. A lot of the guests I have here I've known through school. They were a student of mine, or we were students together, or whatever. Most of the time, I like my guests to introduce themselves as far as what they are. But I would just say my guest has a diverse background in education and music and many things, and all things creative. That might be a good blanket to throw. So this is my special guest, Miss Joy Jones. Joy, how you doing?
How you doing? I'm so happy to be here with you, Mr. Temple. I want to share how far we go back, actually. Our parents actually were teachers who helped to integrate Volusia County schools together. I understand your dad's about to turn 91 years old and my mom is 81. So imagine where they were in their 20s in this hard world with this integration that nobody wanted, and look at where we are now.
I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking about that leading up to this, and how far back your memory went about that. Well, yes, I was thinking about that exact same thing. And since I teach history, I tell a lot of my father's integration and pre-integration stories to let students know, about times from way before them. Well, this is the one question I always tell my guests in advance that I'm going to ask. I'd say, if you stepped on an elevator, someone was there, and you had to describe yourself, which is not fair, but in 6 or 7 seconds, what label or what would you say when they asked, who are you?
I would say very succinctly, I am a listener, observer, and scribe, and I am a person who loves to see other people shine. That's the best I can do, and that's what I mean with my whole heart.
That's good. And that's in line with the conversation we had yesterday, kind of leading up to this show. When let's go back in time. Let's put you in the 9th grade, when you were looking forward and said, when I grow up, I want to be blah blah. What was on the radar for you, 9th, 10th grade for your future?
I always excelled in language arts. It was something about, I don't know why, the silly things like diagramming sentences. And I guess because, like in school, when you're rewarded for doing a thing well, you want to continue to do that, right?
Okay.
So language arts was my bailiwick. And I'm a comedian too, right? Bailiwick. Who uses that word?
Wow,
but
real.
I have all of these archaic words, you know what I mean, that just surface out of nowhere. It's not me putting on airs or anything. It's just having written for a living. I spend most of the time in my head. So I think like I write, and sometimes I'll write and say, so-and-so happened, and then comma, we did so-and-so. And I'll be thinking the comma in my head because, again, I'm so used to writing. But the beauty of conversations is that when it's a real exchange instead of a monologue, when you bat the ball back and forth, you get prompts and things that open your mind in a way that you that you would never have explored had you not had the conversation. And the nature of our lives right now are so isolated and so one-sided with the social media, where we're just always talking and not having a receiver. Not the feedback that we're getting alike is not enough feedback to help us in our lives. You know what I mean? So we really need this kind of a thing. And I'm gonna be quiet. I'm not usually long-winded, but I had a stopper in myself for a long time, and I don't know, something happened. It came unplugged. Now I can't shut up whenever somebody prompts me to talk.
No, we're gonna come back to that stopper concept you were talking about. That's gonna be good. I already know where I'm going with that in a little bit. When you talk about being in your, like a creative person or whatever, kind of, or a writer, being in your head, a lot of my guests are creative people. Sometimes that wasn't the original reason why I had them on the show, but that comes out. What does that mean? Being in your head all the time as a writer or an artist. What's that mean?
Well, you know what? So I think I was a seeker first. I really wanted to know who am I? What is my place in the world? And so I feel like that is what I've been on this journey to kind of figure out. Even when I look back at, like the things that I was writing, the things that I was intrigued by as a young person. And it was because I spent a lot of time as an only child. I spent a lot of time by myself, with myself. Back then it was by myself because it felt lonely. At this stage
Yeah,
in my life, it feels like with myself because I am such good company because I've had such good practice being with myself, you know?
I love it.
Um, but yeah, we all, you know what I mean? We all are creators and we all have creativity. We've just let society define what genius is, what creativity is, and in what lanes creativity belongs. And that's some insanity. We need creativity in every nook and cranny of the world because creative people are resourceful people who see ways that other people don't see things. You know what I mean?
I
They see
do.
they see circuitry. They see, you know what I mean, where somebody may see just a line, a creative person may see it like this. You know what I mean? And the shortest distance between 2 points ain't always a straight line. Sometimes there is a cool way to get to it like this. You know what I mean? You can,
Yes.
but because we value a single narrative, number one, which has been largely, not largely, which has been dictated to us by uh, um, the classism and the racism and the sexism of our society, right? So they've
Mhm.
deemed who is worthy to tell us how to do a thing, right?
Mm.
It's funny. I was just in the library and I was laughing with the woman, and as I was talking about, wow, um, the Dewey Decimal System hadn't given up. You know what I mean? You still got to do that.
Yeah.
And you would have thought I said, um, I don't know, something the most blasphemous. This other lady, look, she's like, it has to be that way. You know what I mean? And I mean, she said it with venom in her voice. It has to be that way. And
Yeah.
all I could think that Prince song, New Power Generation, where it says, we are the new power generation. We want to change the world. The only thing that's in our way is you, your old fashioned music, your old ideas. We're sick and tired of you telling us what to do. And as old as I am, I still feel like that about what power is.
Mm.
Not just at the highest levels,
Okay.
but Black people have mastered, and I don't use that word loosely, they have mastered replicating these awful systems that break our souls and break our backs and keep us from our families. And you know what I mean? All the things that in enslavement we
Mm.
railed against, we will erect a company and employ the same types of formalities and ways of reporting and ways of bringing ideas to fore. There, you know what I mean? All these hierarchies and stuff. And I'm like, why are we doing it that way?
Yeah.
We'll never be free if we go redo the same thing all over again. I'm talking too much. Let me be quiet.
No, no, no. I had a similar conversation. It was a, a history conversation how not just African Americans, but all kind of cultures have been under some kind of a bondage, depression, or whatever. And then when they did their own thing, often they replicated the same thing to the people who came behind them. I'd say that the Pilgrims, they left England for religious freedom and stuff, but when they created their own colonies here, they didn't grant religious freedom to other people there. It had to be, their way. So no, I'm on a similar track in a conversation yesterday. I want to ask you something because you're talking about creativity. Well, let's back up for those who don't. What have you done? You one of the labels you gave yourself was a writer. Can you tell us a little about what writing you've done and what
Yeah, yeah.
areas,
I
arenas?
mean, yeah. So my entire career, that's what I've done. I've written for a living. I
Okay.
um I used to be the editor of publications for the United States and Canada for Tupperware Brands Corporation.
Okay.
So I wrote all the sale, like the magazines and the catalogs, all the descriptions, all the, successful stories of the women who gained freedom through their businesses and stuff like that. I
Okay.
would write the president's letter and everything. So I'm good at being able to hear a vision and cast it in the words of the person that who may not necessarily be able to write but can talk. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
two different skill sets. I've also been public relations manager for the largest healthcare system in Southwest Georgia. And so I would do, at the time when these weren't digital publications, these were magazines that went out like, to a business audience, to a residential audience, to people who did physical therapy and, into the senior walker groups and stuff.
Okay.
So I've, juggling publications like that. I've been director of communications for Bethune-Cookman during a really trying time in its history. I've been communications manager for a premier education reform organization that's really
Hmm.
having a say at this point, at this juncture, what's happening with Black children in public education and across the world, because um, two of the people that I've worked with actually spoke to the United Nations, calling for public education to be a civil right for children of African descent. Very powerful.
Wow. Okay. Um, and we don't think about that. We think about issues in education, particularly for African Americans, but we don't even think about it across diaspora, past the borders of the United States, and how
They have they
that's a
have
thing.
colonized us across the globe. It's hey, as Mos Def says, it's world nigga law.
Wow. Okay. All right. Let's get to it.
That's
But
good too.
there, and talking about that, then see, and it's good that your background is so diverse. There's all the different directions that I can go. I want to give you a scenario that's a real one, and see your take on it or how to help it. When I was an administrator, at times we would see that we would have African American students who, for the next school year, had signed up for a regular course, like regular English, regular math, or whatever. But in looking at their test scores and stuff, we would see that a lot of these students had the ability to take AP and honors and all that. So we would call the parent. We would say, hey, we would like to put Johnny in an AP honors or whatever. Mom would say yes. And shortly after that, though, the student would come to what mom would call us and say, hey, Johnny says he wants to get out of it. He says, it's too hard. But in talking with Johnny later, if it was a student I knew, sometimes the student would confide that it wasn't that it was too, that's kind of what they told mom, that it was too hard. But the truth was they weren't used to being the only Black kid, or in AP or whatever, or his friends would give him a hard time about being in the smart class or whatever, and it wouldn't be from mistreatment from white students, it would be his own. So my question is, in that scenario, how do we buffer, encourage students, particularly students of color, to take those steps into realms where they might be the only one, but it's a good place, it's an opportunity. Any thoughts about that?
Many thoughts. Working in education research, Dr. Donna Y. Ford is a leading researcher in Black gifted education. The research shows that Black children are, like 80% of teachers are white women, number one, right? And they they underestimate Black children. The research says it, and it starts as early as preschool, the discrimination against kids. But
Mhm.
Black kids are not recommended for the reason that they're the only ones is because they aren't often recommended to gifted and AP programs by their white teachers. You know what I mean? So that is part of it. That's that, if you look at root cause, the reason they're the only one is because they aren't recommended at the rate that they should be based on
Okay.
their intellectual capital, right? We know
Okay.
we know they're smart, and we also got to look at curriculum. Many more kids, if they had content that was relevant to their lives, would find themselves in these so-called smart classes because they would be having education that prepares them for life. Du Bois says education must not simply teach work, it must teach life. And so much of what happens in these schools is teaching memorization
Hmm.
and colonization, right?
Okay.
That's the way I see it.
Mm.
That's been my experience. That's
Hmm.
been my experience, and that's been the experience of my young adult children who are in their 30s. And when I look at the textbooks, and the NAEP tests and things that these current generation kids are taking, it's the same. It's the same rote memorization and examples that may not approximate things that are, you know, indigenous to them. You know what I mean? I'll give you a case in point. I worked at
Okay.
Head Start, and a kid flunked the test. The kid identified a lamp as a light when the right answer was a lamp. But culturally speaking, in that child's home, they called it a light. You know what I
Okay.
mean? And so,
I do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
do.
So,
And
yeah.
I remember going to a workshop in education once, and it was centered around a book called um, Identifying Giftedness in Poverty.
Woo,
And
yeah. You know what? But just the idea that that's an oxymoron. The book seems to suggest that you would not find genius in poverty. And that's some, how in the world do people think that
well,
poverty is based on income?
well, maybe the book could have been retitled, but actually the genesis and the message of the book was good. The theme of the book was that we typically look for let me rephrase what it said, that a kid from the middle class or upper class might show their giftedness in ways differently that minority students do or that students in poverty do. And the genesis of the book was teaching people how to recognize that giftedness, even if it didn't look like the middle class package that they were used to seeing. It was quite eye opening, very much so, and just kind of reflects your message that the signs we look for, the evidence, so to speak, isn't just empirical. It's kind of shaped by what we biases and things that we've already had,
And,
in
and,
our own
and
minds.
and when you consider that education's foundations are based on the research of people who never thought Black people should even learn, you know what I mean? Think about that. Who Piaget? Who are the other people that they refer to all the time?
Yeah, that's
Those,
right.
you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? They
Yeah.
didn't even think we were supposed to learn, but then but then we build everything around how people learn. And one of the things that
Mm.
they found is that, like, you know, intergenerational learning is valuable. Learning by doing, but the one size fits all
Ah,
way that most American classrooms are set up, especially for Black kids. The higher up you get in income, you get
mm-hmm.
schools that they get to move around, they have more resources, they get to learn by doing through many creative ways. But our kids are still taught to sit in their seats
Okay.
and walk in a straight line and all that rigidity
Mm.
that does not stoke or help creativity. You know what I mean?
I
They
hear that.
shut it down. That regimentation is the antithesis of creativity.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
N- Now, now you're saying creativity, and that's a jumping off point for something I wanted to come back to that you mentioned earlier. Um, you've worked in fields where we would expect a creative person, in quotes, to be, as far as words and writing and then artistic things or whatever. But you also mentioned earlier that there's a creativity in all of us. It's not just in the museum painter on the wall or whatever. Can-
Absolutely.
Could you talk about ways, maybe touching on already, ways to feed or unleash the creativity that's in us, whether we are, traditional artists or
Yes.
something else? How do you feed that? How do you give that thing life and breath?
For each person is different. For me, it's nature. That is my muse, and you know what I mean. Just being in nature and
I do.
seeing myself in it, not above anything, but you know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
we think we're at the top of the food chain, but we got shown who was at the top of the food chain, I think. But find what we know innately, those things that gave us joy as a child, for whatever reason, where they say when I was a child, where you put childish things away. I think we take that way too literally. There are some things as
Okay.
children in our spirit, that spirit of play and adventure and wonder
Yes.
and awe. If we leave those things by the wayside, I mean, walk yourself to an early grave. You know what I mean? I don't want to just
Okay.
get through life. You know what I mean? I'm still trying to, like, to not to step on the crack. I ain't gonna break my mama's back. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
Literally, I skip, I swing in a swing. I hang upside down. I mean, literally, I play. I really play. I think it's important that, and I mean, and when you think about it, we shun play, but then we spend all our money watching people play. The people who play for a living are well rewarded for their work,
Mm.
right? And we admire them. But we got to play, but then we got to figure out what inspires us. For some people, it may be like beautiful architecture, right? Just seeing how something's put together. It may be looking at a tree or a flower. It may be clothing, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Color. It may be the ocean. You know what I mean? But one thing about it, no matter what our life circumstance is, and I think about this a lot. Oh, something that really broke my heart the other day. I rode by Atlanta Penitentiary, and the slice of window that are on those jail cells, and it makes me think about how inhumane human beings can be to one another. Whoever would design a punishment that would make solitary confinement and not being able to see the sunshine outside,
Okay.
that is a certain level of depravity. You know what I mean? And
I
so
do.
I think this, I think not I think creativity is essential to our well-being, because there isn't a person who would be creative who could accept treating another human being like that if they still had that part of their. I think your creativity is part of, is connected to your soul in a way that
Mm-hmm.
maybe your head and your, maybe not even your heart, I don't know, but we need to find a way to stoke it. I think is deeply connected to our humanity and how we represent ourselves in the world and interact
Yeah.
with other people. Yeah, yeah, we see ourselves as connected when we are creative, I think.
Well, now you talked about still, even as adults, don't step on a crack, skipping, things like that. Have you always kept that childlike nature about yourself, or did you, like most adults, kind of lose it and have to consciously get it back?
I've always, it's always been there, not as robust at different times, you know what I mean? But I've always known that whenever I'm feeling out of sorts, that that is the way to fix it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That, that's movement is my medicine. I figured that out. You know what I mean? Things hurt. I turn on. It's funny the things that I can do in my strength when there's music on that I can move to.
Mm.
If you turn the music off, it gets heavy. You know what I mean? It's like George Clinton says, here's the chance to dance our way out of our constrictions. I take that
Yeah,
literally.
that's good.
And I do. I dance until the hurt goes away. If something's troubling my mind, if I'm worrying, I dance until there's no thought in my mind. Now, different people get in flow different types of way. You could ride your
Mm-hmm.
bike, you could do yoga, whatever it is you do, to get your mind in a state that is serving you, right? Because all of that
Mm-hmm.
negative self-talk is not helping us at all. And too much of our self-talk is doubt and, you know what I mean? Self-criticism and
Mm-hmm.
unsureness, or, you know what I mean? And people who talk about people. I think that's my self-talk because I'm introspective. I
Okay.
think the people I think people who turn it on the outside, it turns into gossip and being intrigued by what is going on in other people's lives, right?
Mm-hmm. When
Right.
I I always have a like a phrase, is like a subtitle for the episode. So I think when you said movement is my medicine, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the subtitle
That's my
for
mantra.
that. I love that. Um, Now you talked earlier about, like, you talked about when we were talking earlier, and you said at one point you would, I think you said the word plugged up or something like that, like you didn't share much,
Yeah.
and now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
on point. Take
yeah.
us back. So how did that trans how did that come about, for being a person who kind of plugged up, as you said, and then
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
pulled the plug out? Because I know that's going to help people.
I will tell you, a lot of times if you're a person, I'm a conflict averse. I avoid conflict at all costs.
Okay.
Subjugate always put other people first, do things so that, I'm not going, if there's going to be a conflict, I'm not going to be the source. I'm going to be the person that's going to make something work. Right.
Okay.
But if you're always doing that all the time, and then the moment that you object or speak your piece, and then other people can't handle your truth,
Mm-hmm.
your perspective and stuff, it is that awareness and stuff that if a person's comfort depends on my silence, then there's something amiss in that relationship. Very often that can be in interfamilial relationships, you know what I mean? Because out
Mm-hmm.
of respect and deference, because of age and those things, that you don't say things, right? But then you can have people who say everything and say to you in ways that are not kind or
Mm-hmm.
warm or all those things. But you know what I mean? I'm not saying that you're pushing back, but even if you just speak up for yourself, it kindly, the way it affects them. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? All I'm saying is when you realize you're in those spaces, extract yourself. You can love people, but you don't have to be up under them. You know
Okay.
what I mean? I Spirit don't lie, energy don't lie. You gotta trust your gut. When you're around people and have an uneasiness, trust it. You know what I mean? On your job, in your family, people you meet. You know, the same way we have chemistry with people, it's not always a sexual thing, right? A lot of times that's our mistake. We turn it into that. But
Right.
sometimes there's just a certain alchemy that when these two people meet, we're gonna put something together that's gonna create a spark that's gonna make something better, not just for us, but possibly for other people too, right? It could
I,
be that.
I love that you use the term alchemy. And I remember when my own kids who are in their 20s and 30s now, when kids are small and you meet some adult that and you say, hey, say hello to Mr. Charlie or whatever, right? And I noticed, not at first, but after a while, I would notice certain people that they would, be comfortable with and others
Mm-hmm.
that they would withdraw from. And in every case, these are people that they didn't know their first time meeting them. Some of them, they were perfectly comfortable, others withdrawing. And I learned not to try to make them, they had to be polite,
Yes.
but, I didn't try to push it when I started to notice and I
Yes.
started to realize maybe they were catching some things that I was missing, but that there was
Absolutely.
something there.
Absolutely. And there's the thing. I think we treat our children poorly. You know what I mean? I mean,
Hmm.
in general, I mean, we force kids to be we force them to grow up too much, too fast, and punish them for things they shouldn't know already. And all, you know
Uh-huh.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yes, yes.
raising them, I think about just you know, life experience. You know what I mean? It's like what triggered this. I overheard just this parent berating their child over getting a kink in a water hose. Right?
Hmm.
I mean, he used f bombs and I never heard the kid make a peep, which tells me this probably is something. You know what I mean? That he's too scared to even. He wasn't crying or anything, but the parents' words were violence to me. Anytime somebody's talking to somebody harshly and cuss words to me, it feels
Yeah.
like violence to me. It
Hmm.
feels like violence to me, and I don't. You know, when I see it, I don't want to be around. And those are little things like that. That over time, your discernment and your radar about your own safety. You just have to listen to that. It is there for you to serve you. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, before our time runs out, I just want to say, I want us all to do more than just survive in this world. It's time for Black people to thrive, to really, really thrive, and to, you know what I mean, to enjoy the fullness of their lives and the beauty of this world without constraints. You know what I mean?
I do.
Without that those two warring souls, without that white
Hmm.
man on your shoulder. You know what I mean? It's like that's why I love Toni Morrison, where she talks about how in her work, she really always her thing was not to have the white gaze. And that has always been with me. I don't want to have the white gaze. You know what I mean? I don't want to have nobody's gaze
I've
because
got that.
I believe I'm as close to the truth as anybody else because I pursue it. You know what I mean? And so a
Hmm.
lot of the things that we get and are told are people's opinions wrapped around history, just because it's in a book
Wow.
somewhere. You know what I mean? But I do. I trust me. And and
Wow.
and I think that's where we need to be. I mean, I think that needs to be our goal in life. You know what I mean? That we ain't got to sit up and watch the news 24/7 and know what's happening in the world. We can go out in it, see for ourselves, and believe what
Hmm.
the world is telling us. Because what is on the news, that ain't what's happening. That is that's that fear mongering and all those things that keep us
Hmm.
at each other's throats and stuff. Walk outside your house and see how generally kind mostly all people are when you encounter them. Do that enough and you
Hmm.
don't want to turn on the news.
This is one I ask a lot of people, and I definitely want to ask you this. I'll give you an imaginary scenario. You have a friend, and they have a son, daughter who's about to step into the world. They're about to graduate high school, and they say,
Mhm.
"Hey, Joy, my son, my daughter, they're very smart, they're capable. if they choose to go to college, they can go. They've been accepted. So it's not that they don't have options, but they're just not sure what they want to do, what they want to be. And you're important in our lives. Would you just take Billy or Sally to dinner and share with them, what? So my question is, in that scenario, what direction do you think you would give that Billy or Sally who's, stepping into their life?
I would have nothing but questions for that person. I wouldn't be telling them anything. I would ask them, you know what I mean? What do you love to do? What would you do for a living, even if you never got paid for it? Pursue that thing mightily. Yeah.
How about, but Miss Joy, the thing I like, as far as I know, doesn't make a lot of money, or it's risky. I like the arts, but all are starved to death or whatever. When they've heard that stuff, what do you say?
I would say you would regret leaving something that is deeply part of your DNA, that is part of your fiber, your being, you know what I mean? If music is in your heart and you choose architecture and no music, your places are going to be drab because there's not going to be, you know what I mean? It's not
good.
Just it's your lifeblood. You know what I mean? Whatever that thing is that you do. Yes. And I think it's because we have been we have been programmed to think that money is our only resource. You know what I mean? That because this job doesn't make a lot of money, your job may make a lot of difference, and they may reward you in a way that a lot of money may not. You know what I mean? You may have a job where when a crisis happens in your family, some teenagers show up and show you love that you didn't expect, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Or you may have $2 million in the bank and be on every antipsychotic and can't sleep at night. Your legs restless, your mind busy because of whatever it is you're doing got you stressed. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I really do think we need to stop, like making college the be all and end all, because sending these kids out in the world with this 40,000 plus debt for these $20,000 jobs that only 6 are reserved for Black people, period, anyway, when they could learn something to, you know what I mean? Not just trades. You know what I mean? I'm talking about starting early in your home. If your kid is making jewelry, if your kid is making potato pies, if your kid is designing something, if your kid is doing an app, just whatever, if your kid is creating anything, try to invest in that. And it's much easier now because you have all these resources like on YouTube and stuff. Many of us are autodidact, right? The thing we need to inculcate in our children is to learn how they learn, not what to learn. Learn how they learn. Help them to really, really hone in on that. Am I a visual learner? Am I tactile? Do I need to try it out? Do I need to hear it? Do I need to do all of these things? When you figure that out and then let the kid like the child-led learning that the homeschooling parents are doing. What if your kid wants to learn everything through agriculture or learn everything through their love of soccer? You can let them read as long as they're building vocabulary and stuff. You know what I mean? Somebody else has been choosing the lens for them all their lives. Just think about that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I was reading a NAEP test, and the test had everything to do with nautical knots. Now, me in my adulthood, I wouldn't be interested in that because I wouldn't be interested in that. But it was like these long passages of language that the kids got to filter through. How many kids really need to know? You know what I mean? Of course, your learning has to extrapolate from one thing to another. But you got to put the learning at kids. You got to make it something that they're intrigued by. Case in point, real quick, I remember I took my daughter to see the Gee's Bend quilts at the museum. Lo and behold, the following week, she was taking ACT. What was on the test? The Gee's Bend quilts. I mean, just that familiarity of something that she had seen before. But how many kids of any race gonna have to tie a nautical knot?
Yeah, I get it. Right.
But that's on a standardized test that keep telling you that 80% of the kids are not proficient in reading. You got them reading about nautical knots. Let them read about 50 years of hip-hop. You know what I mean? We'll get something totally different. You can still test kids' knowledge of vocabulary, nuance, all those things that you're teaching, but content is king.
Okay.
Yeah, I talk too much, but boy, thank
No,
you.
no, it's just
Jeez.
like what is like. It's just like poking somebody who's full, and when you poke, it pours out. So that's good stuff.